Hey guys, Thomas the Silver Jr. here, aka Mustached Tom, here to review Klonoa, The Door to Phantomile. If you end up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. The first will head you over to my petition, second and third will head you over to my Patreon and PayPal, and the fourth will head you over to my Discord server. And any and all donations to the Patreon/PayPal will help support me and the channel, and shilling will be reminded at the end of the review. With that out of the way, let's get into Klonoa, Door to Phantomile. So, Klonoa is a game I have heard off and on about for quite some time, but never really got my hands into, or onto, or however I want to phrase that. That is until Bandai Namco finally decided to release a re-release with the first two games on it. So I decided to check it out with the support of my Patreon supporter, of course. So, that is included with this review. So here we are. And of course I am here to review it as objectively as possible. So, there's that. Now I usually go over story and gameplay, typically speaking, and there is a little bit of story here, so let's get into that first. So, the story starts out relatively simple, where Klonoa seems to be on his own sort of more whimsical journey, just to go visit his, as he refers to as his grandma/grandpa, though there seems to be some sort of village vibe, more so than actual relative nature to it. Nonetheless, Klonoa is joined by his blue bubble boy, Hupo, and his journey into this sort of whimsical nature. However, as things progress and nightmares are unveiled, we have a classic vintage bad guy who talks about something much deeper, and we get all this stuff about Klonoa being a part of a prophecy, and more so, it ends up being revealed that this is all part of a dream, and that he was called here as the sort of outside dream warrior, as it were. And from there, his destiny becomes sort of the pinned point and the rest of the story, and so on and so forth. So, the story is, again, relatively simple, and the sort of typical cliche of, chosen one or you are destined to be the hero stories typically are, pretty decent to meh a lot of the times. There is something more interesting about this in this regard, that being Klonoa seemed to, again, be on a more whimsical adventure, and then it became that kind of story. And you just layer on top of that it being sort of a dream sequence, so you don't really know the full consequence of what would have happened if failure was the outcome. Though there does seem to be some sort of vague idea about nightmares taking over, I guess. Whatever that may imply. Like, I guess dreams to stop or something, I guess. A little bit of push work, but I think that's the general gist of the story. So, for that, I would probably give the story like a 5 or a 6 out of 10. It's, serviceable for what's going on, I suppose. The gameplay sort of follows a very similar scoring, but we'll get more in depth into that right now. So, for the gameplay, as you play this sort of platformer, basic platformer, the primary use of your abilities is you have this ring that can suck up an enemy, and you can proceed to either throw it or, throw it, essentially, in a direction or two, whether that be ahead or below you. And essentially the platforming mainly revolves around that, or, just general jumping in direction while collecting these gems and collecting these little dream warriors that are scattered throughout the stages. So, pretty simplistic. Now, there's a phrase I use on this channel, and I've used it quite often. You might have heard me use it. It is called the level of escalation. That is, in terms of gameplay, when the game reaches a certain point and the requirements sort of escalate to sort of match your your progression, as it were. And I do think that this game does struggle with it just a bit, but it's okay-ish here. It's definitely not the worst I've seen in terms of level of progression, that is for sure. It's what I would call a pretty significant bump, but not one that is impossible to overcome or too irritating, although it can get a little bit annoying. That will be the extent I would push it to, is it can get a little bit annoying, but still passable. It is still accessible. There was only one level design design choice that I thought was relatively weak, and that was this sort of hidden key doorway, and I mentioned it in the part it picks up at. Outside of that one little almost hidden doorway sequence, I'm pretty sure everything else was pretty standard fare in terms of, as you progress forward and reach closer and closer to the end, you would expect the game to sort of, enhance in its difficulty to match, your abilities to pull off these skills and use the enemies as previously established. But in that regard, I would also say the scoring of that in its general form would probably also still be a closer 6 out of 10. And again, I would only go as 6 for the clear irritations of it, but more so some of that one level design thing definitely is something worth pointing out in that regard in terms of being objective. But it's definitely not enough to knock it, I don't think, anywhere below a 6. But it's still a relatively decent score for a vintage classic video game. I suppose the hype for it was a little bit much, I suppose, but I can understand it as someone who is a fan of something else that is also, put out by Bandai Namco. I fully understand that sort of outcome of outpour, and I can see why a lot of people would have missed this. This is one of the furry mascots, as they have been named to have known. That is just, he's sort of in the background, and outside of these two games, I'm not sure how many more he has had outside of these two games. So I'm not sure if he's not quite progressed, say, as say Spyro or Crash Bandicoot has in the past. But maybe this game, this re-release, if anything, might budge Bandai Namco to make something further for Klonoa in the future. Who knows? But, if that day ever comes, I might give it a shot to see how much more they've improved over the time. And seeing how, the jumping and throwing abilities can be further manipulated. And I'm right there with the pitching of this, since I was on the very same boat as, say, Digimon. Since, again, that is also put out by Bandai Namco. And Digimon Survive is feeding me great. Let's just say that. But that is a video for another time. And a Let's Play series, you should definitely check it out if you haven't already. Anyways, that's enough, shifting to Digimon. I'll close it out by saying both 6s out of 10s for both story and gameplay, and that is my full review of Klonoa Door to Phantomile. And of course, when I finish the second one, you can expect a second review for the second one to see if there's any differing opinions and so on and so forth. And with that out of the way, if you ended up enjoying this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help smaller YouTubers. Second and third will head you over to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and the channel. And the fourth will head you over to my Discord server, where you can potentially meet other smaller YouTubers, potentially collab and do all the talking and stuff there. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.